Discard the rubbish left behind by the less fortunate. Hey, I had a client at work named Scott who told me he wasn't happy with something I had made. I had just struggled to make a wedding dress. Scott tore the dress in front of me and trampled on it, even though I tried to follow his specific instructions and constantly shifting demands. His actions were nothing but dehumanizing to me, the creator. I so made the decision to exact revenge on Lisa, a classmate. I carried out a plan with my coworker's assistance and made the decision to add a finishing touch. I turned to face the intruding Scott and said, "Scott, things won't go your way. I have to stop letting him get my way. Eric is my name. I'm a male in my 40s who has back discomfort a lot. I work at a place where desk jobs are common, so I'm constantly concerned that I'm not exercising enough. I am employed by a manufacturer of bridal gowns. Since many women only wear a wedding dress once, making memories for other people is the one aspect of my otherwise routine existence that makes me proud. When I'm working, I have a great sense of duty. Simultaneously, the most enjoyable aspect for me is learning about clients' preferences and painstakingly crafting every detail to suit their desires. A client was thrilled with her design the other day. I'm glad to hear that. I'm hoping for an amazing wedding for them. Observing our clients' joyful faces brings me great satisfaction in my work. I have always been interested in wedding dresses, even as a small child. I think it started when, while I was in elementary school, I received an invitation to a neighbor's sister's wedding. Her vibrant bridal gown made a lasting impression on me. When I saw a child, even as an adult, wearing a colorful dress that seemed to capture the lively spirit of an active older sister, it had a profound effect on me. I was shocked to see someone wearing a colorful dress for a wedding instead of dressing up as a different person because I had always assumed that wedding dresses were white. I questioned her. "Why is your dress so colorful?" Out of curiosity. Maybe because it's the most authentically me look. A wedding only occurs once in a lifetime, after all. It was unforgettable how joyfully she grinned in response to my question. That encounter made me want to grow up to meticulously design wedding gowns that fit every cuirassar precisely. Fall is upon us, and the temperature in the office drops. We're using heating appliances to change the temperature in the space. I was talking to a junior coworker in the morning just after I got to work about old times. The man next to me, a young man working on promotional posters, remarked, "It looks like a hard-working young man." James is his name, and he started working for the company this spring. James is a good man who constantly puts in a lot of effort in his work and is keen to learn from us and develop as a result. It's satisfying to teach him. I take it that you pay close attention to what the client asks for. If the client is not properly consulted, we can make a dress that fits them. It must be difficult to translate an image into an actual clothing for bespoke orders. With appreciation, the curious junior looked up and whispered, "That's impressive." He's working on promotions for now, but in the future, I might allow him to assist with bridal dress designs. Introducing him to a variety of jobs now will undoubtedly help later on. My cell phone in my chest pocket rang just as I was thinking about the future after I had completed reflecting on the past. I noticed the name of a client I was in charge of when I checked the screen. I called the client outside the premises and exited the room so as not to wake James. "You're late in getting back to me," yelled the man on the other end. The man, named Scott, was in his 30s, and he spoke in a furious tone. He is the president of a reputable corporation for the second generation. I apologize. The call had concluded in less than a minute, but the person on the other end sounded quite impatient. Scott snorted and said, "I hope the dress is ready," as I apologized. "It's constructed elegantly and simply for my partner, without any extraneous embellishments, am I correct?" He was curious about the status of my work, but this wasn't the first time he had called over this issue, so I refrained from thinking, not again. The fact that Scott calls nearly every day has made things a little overwhelming. Naturally, the work is going quite nicely. I mentally replayed Scott's plea. I took care to create it so that it wouldn't be too gaudy because he wanted it to be a dress for a demure woman. Really, it doesn't seem like you're letting up, he queried, describing what had been finished and how far along they had come. Where exactly are you in the process? He said, although some people may find these types of queries bothersome. Answering them is a requirement of the job. He's understandably worried because it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, but he didn't seem content despite my thoughtful comments. I have to check in every day as a client since you're unreliable. You're not able to perform your job well, most likely because you're just a high school graduate. The discussion took a turn and became an attack on my educational background. I listened silently, not sure what to say. I didn't want to drag out the conversation with pointless remarks because fighting back could result in the order being canceled, which would be bad for the business. After spending several minutes on the phone, Scott appeared content. Subsequently, he made fun of me and implied that I wasn't intelligent or well-educated because I wasn't wealthy enough to attend college. Finally, he hung up and exclaimed, "Don't think I'll accept anything." Scott spoke primarily by himself during the call, suggesting he didn't require my answers. The idea that he is a corporate president is absurd. How can one run a business when they don't listen to other people? James mentioned that perhaps this is a situation where the others are capable when we spoke about it later. Maybe the individuals in his immediate vicinity are capable, or maybe his parents are affluent enough to cover any mistakes he makes as a manager. I understand, but he's a problematic client for us. Perhaps he is widely liked in his inner circle and has a strong support system. People who are not who they seem abound throughout the world. Maybe Scott is just another one of those people, because among my pals, there's even a lady who enjoys a demanding man. In retrospect, it turns out that this was accurate, but at the time, I never thought Scott could be so bad. A few days later, I decided to go to the department store to buy a model kit for my hobby because it was my day off and I would spend the morning relaxing. It's critical to take appropriate breaks on days off in order to do high-quality work. That day, I had intended to purchase a model kit to construct, but I had no idea that I would run into someone I knew. A 40-something woman came up to me while I was going around the department store. "Is it not? Eric? Long time. No see." It was Lisa who called out to me. She used to be a high school classmate and currently owns a sizable business. "Jay, a long time has passed. We haven't really seen each other in perhaps 5 years. We live close by, but we don't get together too often. On my days off, I usually just sit around the house. After work, I'm too exhausted to want to go out. That's why once we started talking, even though it had been a few years since I last saw Lisa, we were able to have a seamless conversation. We had no trouble joking about as we strolled together. I was overcome with nostalgia as I thought back to our high school years and how we used to connect. We used to go camping in the mountains or swimming at the sea when we were in our 20s. Surely it must be the age. Isn't that a little impolite? Bringing up a woman's age in that manner. We had a great talk and decided to get lunch together. I had only had a light breakfast because we were both there, so I was considering treating myself to a substantial supper. I'm craving a hamburger. Eric, how about you? I'll also have the hamburger. It brings to mind the ones we provided food for the school festival. What a serendipitous event. It was exactly what I was thinking. I recall how our class got together to manage a hamburger stand at the school festival while we were in high school. Lisa and I took turns cooking, and we became bored tasting everything. The anecdotes from the past seemed to go on forever even as we said grace and started eating. But as the talk went on, I was taken aback by what I heard next. How come? You're tying the knot. Yes, my boyfriend is really attractive and a little younger than I am. He is the second-generation president of a developing company, not the founder. Therefore, he is somewhat used to adversity. All right, congrats. My friend received my heartfelt congrats. I was relieved to learn she had found a decent partner because I had been wondering why someone so kind as her hadn't gotten married yet. Knowing that her lifelong desire to get married was finally being fulfilled made her heart sing. "I want you to marry me, even if all you do is sit around at home," he said in his proposal. "Do you not believe he's a fantastic guy? Is he a saint of some sort?" Her spouse appeared to be completely enamored with Lisa. "It seems like you wouldn't say anything like, 'You don't have to do anything,' unless you truly like someone. He's just an everyday guy. Scott Jameson is the man's name." That name sounds normal, doesn't it? Although the name is not remarkable, something about it seemed familiar. In my current position, I had a client with the same name. Even though name sharing is uncommon, this particular coincidence struck me as noteworthy. No, I recall that Scott, my cursor, asked for a dress that was both lovely and modest. It doesn't seem to fit Lisa, who is direct and intelligent, so they must be separate persons. "I'll send you an invitation. We're planning the wedding in 3 months." "Many thanks. I'll bring a lovely gift." "I'm grateful." However, Lisa's smile soon vanished, revealing a trace of worry. "What's not right? Is there something causing you trouble?" He seems to be highly focused on his educational history, which is a bit odd to say. "Explain what you mean." According to Lisa, Scott, also known as Scott Jameson, is strict with those who dropped out of middle or high school. It seems that he expresses his desire to avoid interacting with individuals who have not completed their college education. The talk took a bad turn, and I scowled. Naturally, I think that's a bad way to think, but may I ask if it's all right if I do? Although at first I believed Scott to be a good man, he appeared to have problems. "What makes Lisa want to wed someone like that?" She said, a little hesitantly. He knows it's an unfair prejudice, seeing my reaction. "I think I have to trust him because he's making an effort to improve as our partner." Scott was thus presently attempting to overcome his prejudices. I couldn't express how stunned I was by that. I'm only Lisa's classmate, so my thoughts wouldn't help but might even get in the way. I hope their divergent moral philosophies won't cause them to split up. From now on, you will be with him. Apply as much pressure as necessary, your love, to help him get better. Obviously, we need to collaborate because we plan to get married. Over lunch, we carried on chatting about our high school years before parting ways. My phone rang a few days later while I was hard at work in the office. The dress was now in the sewing stage, but he began calling several times a day, maybe out of worry for the status of the project. It was impeding my job, so I wished he would quit, but he would not listen. I sighed and turned to check my phone, only to see that Lisa had called. This is uncommon because she doesn't usually call me throughout the workday. She usually calls me in the evenings or on vacations, asking if something went wrong. But this time, I left the office to answer her call. "Hello, is this Eric?" I exclaimed as I made my way outside. "What's going on, Lisa? You don't usually call at this hour." Though it's difficult to say, I felt compelled to inform you. Lisa sounded depressed, not like she did when we met. For me, what she said at the beginning was actually unexpected. First of all, it turned out that my cursor Scott and her fiancé Scott were one and the same, but that was the least of my worries. I couldn't even speak after hearing the more startling information. "Is that accurate?" "Yes, I apologize." "No, you are not at blame. All of it is Scott's fault." I put my head in my hands and imagined Derek's face, feeling bad for my classmate who apologized softly. "Let's consider our next course of action." "Okay, I'll give you a call back after work. Apologies." Like me, Eric, Scott is a wedding dress designer who appears to be producing problems for our business. I can't let him be alone. I had recently finished a wedding dress I had been working on, and I had made arrangements for my cursor Scott to come look it over. Scott appeared agitated the entire time he was at the company, and Lisa, who accompanied him, felt uneasy. I had never met her before at this company. She must have taken the day off, even though it's a weekday, specifically for this. I showed Scott and Lisa the bridal gown that James and I had placed on a mannequin. As asked, it's a straightforward piece with few ornamentation. I took off the dress's cover and gave it to James. As he is not involved in what follows, he is a junior colleague who was invited for educational purposes. I made him wait in silence in a room corner. This is the wedding dress you requested. I turned back to Scott and his group and started to go over the details of the completed wedding dress. I started to explain the adjustments that were made during the design process in detail, but I was interrupted. That's enough. I made every effort to live up to Derek's expectations. On multiple occasions, I had provided him the design forecasts and shown him pictures of the dress as it was being made. It should not have come as a complete surprise because we have repeatedly confirmed it. Everything would have ended amicably if they had been satisfied. However, that was untrue. What a horrible bridal gown. It's not at all like the picture I painted. Lisa cannot wear something like this. Scott began berating the bridal dress in front of him, claiming that the materials were subpar and the design was poorly done. It may not fit Lisa's personality, but the current design was just what he requested. I tailored it according to your order, but it didn't meet your expectations. Obviously not. Such a simple dress will seem unappealing on our important day. It doesn't fit Lisa's intelligent demeanor. I was unsure of how to respond after hearing him say that all prior requests were invalid. Even though I've lived long enough to see a lot, I had never met someone so irrational before. James was there, and his lips was as open as mine. From the corner of the room, he said to himself, "What's going on in that guy's head?" Be kind with yourself, Scott. Someone put a lot of effort into this. Although Lisa is being kind, effort is insufficient on its own. It's worthless business without any results. He was correct, of course, but I didn't want to hear it from him. Scott appeared to have a soft spot for Lisa despite his hostile demeanor, hurriedly offering her numerous words of comfort. "Eric, what should we do?" It's obvious as day that this circumstance will not satisfy him. I transcribed some of our talks in case something similar occurred. Should I carry it with me? Well, what should we do? Scott turned to face us, scowling, and said in a childlike tone as he heard us talking. Scott had just finished consoling Lisa. "I placed this order. I'll accept that because I paid for it." "So you're going to use this dress for the wedding?" Lisa inquired, looking perplexed when she heard this and realized what was being said. Scott shook his head and parted his lips when he saw Lisa's confused expression. "Obviously not. I won't allow you to wear something that awful." In addition, he paused in the middle of his statement and looked down on us as he went on. The individual in front of us is a recent high school graduate who is aware of the potential issues that could result from a product created by someone with such a low level of education. It is untrustworthy. I was wondering what Scott was going to do with the garment he had paid for when he reached into his pocket and took the scissors, which he had conveniently brought with him, and tore the dress off the mannequin. "Throw away this trash made by the less fortunate," he scoffed as he looked at us. And when he was leaving the room, he walked on the pieces of the bridal dress that were lying on the floor. Lisa was apologizing, appearing pale, but I was too shocked to absorb what she was saying. Thankfully, he didn't decline to pay at least. My pride as a designer was crushed, even if it was a comfort that the company was not negatively impacted. But it seems that Scott, who had already damaged my soul, had plans to torture me even more. He supposedly tried to write negative reviews of my business online that evening. Who knows what would have occurred if Lisa hadn't found it and halted it. She remained at Scott's house to keep an eye on his behavior, which stopped the incident. She emailed me the news 1 hour after work finished. Later that evening, I found out that Lisa and Scott had a horrible fight. Luckily, we were spared any harm because Lisa had threatened to not marry you if you post bad things online. But I wasn't going to sit back and take it all in. I purposely expressed my emotions in order to fortify my commitment. Scott, things won't go your way. Luckily, I had anticipated Scott's scheme and was ready to get revenge. Scott may not have revealed such plans if he hadn't acted dishonestly today. With Lisa's information, I made contact with a number of businesses. These were tiny manufacturers of fabrics and threads that Scott's company had intimidated or coerced. My strategy was to get these businesses to work with our organization instead of Scott and to cease doing business with him. Even though I didn't press them, they all nodded rapidly, suggesting that their relationship with Scott was already strained. Scott's company started to delay the creation of bridal dresses after that day. Lisa claims that because of the complaints from cuirassiers, Scott was getting more and more worn out. Then, a disheveled Scott burst into our company the day before the wedding. You've recently communicated with the businesses we work with. I've been informed about it. Now please stop bothering us. What topic are you discussing? I have only transacted with businesses that are required to make dresses. It is merely a coincidence that it was your company's. Please stop lying so openly. I know what you're planning. If you continue to act in such manner, we will disseminate negative feedback about you. With a flushed face and a wheezing temper, Scott spoke up. But would Lisa consent to that? Your fiancé will be upset if you do that. I promise not to hold it against her if she calls off the engagement. I refuted those words in my heart, silently. Lisa will understand me. Lisa is not the type of person that supports everyone in everything they do. She was always critical of others' errors, whether they were made by a close friend or a supervisor, in my memory. I sighed when I saw Lisa pull in. So, Lisa, what brings you here? This is what I was expecting. I can somewhat imagine your actions as your fiancé. She shot me a quick look of regret and turned to face Scott. Scott, disparaging other businesses in order to further your own is not acceptable. What topic are you discussing? You're not going to last with that level of ignorance. I know that society is harsh, but that doesn't mean that harming people is acceptable. Scott paled and turned away from Lisa, giving me a frown instead. You've enchanted Lisa. How dare you touch the woman of another man? He is not involved in this at all. As my fiancé, this is my choice. Do you not realize that? No, Lisa's assertiveness is pressing that. At this, Scott went white and started to perspire. Lisa murmured, "We can't be together anymore," and appeared to take in the fact that she was in the room where the bridal gown was on display. Her eyes lowered to the ground, where bits of Scott's torn garment lay in a scattered heap. "Let's split up," she declared. Scott heard this and grabbed Lisa's shoulder while spitting profusely. "Please refrain from. Consider it carefully. Ericoro is the wedding day. I cherish you. Affection? Most likely, that is a falsehood. I have some time to know it. What, you just choose to target my company because it creates superior supplies with which to cultivate your own? You have never shown me affection. Scott must have targeted Lisa's company because it is renowned for creating high-quality thread, and he may have been successful. When you were intoxicated, I overheard you chatting to yourself. When Scott heard Lisa's dejected remarks, he instantly passed out. Up until today, everything was going smoothly. This is a farce. Where did I make a mistake? Scott turned out to be even more reprehensible than I had thought. He did not apologize. The idea that a business run by a high school graduate has a greater reputation than mine is absurd. I believed that a few negative reviews would attract business. His look was regretful, his jaws gritted in rage. My scheme to eliminate a competitor and acquire a handy woman was a complete failure. Rather than acknowledge his own responsibility, Scott went on the defense, even scolding Lisa. Oh no. I never should have selected a woman such as yourself. I would have preferred a younger, more submissive wife, but you were the only one who was knave enough to give me what I wanted. It hurt to see Scott treat the lady who had been his fiancée up until this point with such disdain. I was unable to let this continue any farther, so I seized Scott by the collar. You should and shouldn't mention certain things. Express your regret to her. What is the apology for? I'm getting married to an old maid, so you should be happy. You ought to have just remained silent. I wanted to attack him because I couldn't resist, but Lisa stopped me in my tracks and smacked him across the face instead. You're in luck since you don't have to wed a woman like that. I'm sorry, and please never again reveal your face to me. Scott departed her company murmuring complaints and sporting a swollen cheek. I requested James to play a little prank on me, and a few seconds later there was a big splash. I had requested him to set up a bucket of water in a spot where, had Scott spotted and avoided it, he would have probably kicked it over. It wasn't necessary for James to empty another pail of water from the floor above. Lisa, left behind, looked resolute as she began making phone calls rather than displaying shock. Hello. We've made the decision to stop doing business in relation to the contract we had. I'll go into more detail later. Kindly give my regards to Scott. She appeared to be phoning her ex-fiance's business. Lisa turned to me when her calls were over and gave me a quick peck on the cheek to lift her spirits. I've decided to cancel the contract with Scott's company, the woman declared. Since it was a big deal, it ought to have a big effect on them. I regret not being able to see his irate expression. You're strong, I remarked. It serves no use to laze around. That isn't who I am. So how about we go out to bars tonight to celebrate my ongoing single status? I gave her a shrug and gladly accepted her invitation. Lisa and I had many stories to tell over cocktails at a tavern that evening. She smiled at me and replied, "Thank you," which gave me hope that she was beginning to get over her recent breakup. Following that, Scott's business lost a lot of business, particularly because crossing Lisa appeared to have a big effect. After losing a significant business partner, Scott's company began to shrink and ultimately filed for bankruptcy. I didn't see Scott again for a while after that incident, but a few years later, I happened to encounter him in a little spinning mill. He appeared so thin that he seemed like a whole other person. As a kind of compensation for the inconvenience, Lisa promoted us, and as a result, our business continued to perform well. Wedding dress orders increased threefold. We had trouble for a while managing the workload with our tiny crew, but we were able to get over this by adding more employees. After a few years, our business had gained local recognition. After enduring a significant tragedy, Lisa eventually had a flawless wedding ceremony. I was relieved that it appeared she had moved on from Scott. I will be there to support her if she ever remembers him. Ultimately, I found myself standing next to her as her partner at the wedding location. Lisa looked breathtakingly gorgeous in the Zurich-made wedding gown I designed for her. She smiled at me brightly, the kind of smile I used to remember seeing on a neighborhood girl.